Okay.
We need to make sure we're telling everybody it's recording too once we get started.
Yeah. They should get a notification when they join, but let's make sure to incorporate that into the upfront. Should I let them in?
Let's do it.
For it.
We're starting, Michael.
When I hear it actually go.
Yeah, come on in. Mute yourself if you're just joining us, and feel free to pop your name and your whereabouts and why you're here in the chat, if so inclined.
I'll say is we've got people logging in here and sharing where they're from. It's exciting to see how much enthusiasm there is all across the country. And I see some familiar names on here, which is really, really cool because there's a couple of folks that are attending that I'll actually be talking about some of the amazing. A lot of fun to see so many great people.
This is awesome. I'm thinking we just get started, Travis, because we have so much to get through, and when people join, they'll figure out what's happening. So hello everyone, welcome. I am so excited that we've already got 90 people in the chat for what will no doubt be an awesome presentation and discussion to help us put shape to what we loosely call our heat pump coach program, but is actually more than just heat pumps. My name is Sarah, and I'm the head of comms and creative at Rewiring America. And this work that we're embarking on with Travis of Abode Energy Management is something we came to in part because we realized there's a real place for the people who are super engaged in this work and want to be able to speak about it articulately with their friends and neighbors and communities. I mean, I am that person in my neighborhood who will talk to anybody on my corner about heat pumps for an hour. And it's a really important role as we try to electrify at the speed we need to be able to, you know, not know as much as a contractor or an engineer necessarily, but be able to, you know, help your neighbors understand this big transformation that is upon all of us. So that's what this webinar is all about. A note that we are recording, hope that's okay, and to pop your name and what you're interested in the chat. And we've also got two things going. We've got both the Zoom chat where we'll post comments and links to interesting stuff, as well as a Q&A window that pops up. So if you have questions that materialize during the talk that you want to be able to ask Travis and Steve, pop those in there and we will moderate those and make sure they get asked during that portion of the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to let Travis and Steve introduce themselves and take it away. And thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And really appreciate Rewiring America for giving us this opportunity to share some of our experiences over the last decade plus in working with communities throughout New England, both as contractors and now as program administrators working with utilities and different local organizations. So my name is Travis. I'm head of operations at Abode Energy Management. As a Massachusetts-based company, we work with a variety of stakeholders, including states in the area, utilities, and many municipalities and nonprofits to deliver high impact decarbonization and energy efficiency campaigns. My personal background is, as I mentioned, I've been in the field, I've sat at the kitchen table, I've had the conversations with families, helping them make, you know, kind of important decisions about their home. And we've been able to, you know, build some amazing partnerships. As I mentioned, some of the folks on this call, Heat Smart Alliance being one of them, doing tremendous things to help families, friends, neighbors, communities really make important decisions. And so I'm very excited to be here with Rewiring America and with Steve to share a little bit about what we've learned and really set the stage for what comes next. How do we help further empower folks like you and your friends out in your communities to just do as much as possible to have as big of an impact as quickly as possible, because this is urgent. This has to happen fast. And we just are so appreciative to everybody that's on this call right now. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Travis. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Steve Pantano. I'm the head of market transformation for Rewiring America. That encompasses our work on policy and research and data science. So really helping to build the tools and foundations for a lot of the work that's just getting started here in the country. As we say, there are 1 billion or so machines to be replaced, fossil fuel machines in our economy. And we have, as we'll talk about a little bit more, a couple decades or so, maybe a little less, to get that all that work done. And a lot of it will rely upon folks like yourselves who have joined us here to learn how to be effective advocates in your community. So part of my job is sharing what we know and what we find at Rewiring, but also learning new ways to learn from all of you as you go out and speak to people in your communities, get feedback, what's working, what isn't, and helping to share those lessons broadly across the country so others can be successful and so you can learn from each other in an effective way. So very glad to be here. Thanks. So I'll go through quickly here the order we'll go through this presentation today. So I'll talk a bit about why we need these community activation programs and folks like yourselves to be coaches in their communities. Some of the sort of setting the stage for the transition we need to make in a bit more detail. Then Travis will talk about common challenges, how to begin, and then come back a little bit at the end and talk about some of the resources that we are developing at Rewiring America to help you do that job. So with that, a little bit more about why we need these programs. So as you may know, having found this webinar through Rewiring America, we exist really for that purpose, to get those 1 billion machines that are out there burning fossil fuels every day to be converted to clean electric alternatives. That includes how we heat our homes, how we heat our water, how we cook our food, and the vehicles we drive, and where we get the energy that we use to power all of those things. We're just getting started on this journey. There's a long way to go, and a lot of that, as I already said, will depend quite a lot on trusted messengers, like yourselves who are out learning and doing the work on the ground in your own homes and in the homes of your friends and neighbors. We want to make this transition as fast and frictionless as possible because we don't think we have time to do anything less than that. So as coaches, as people going out in the community, as myself, as someone who works for Rewiring America, all the time I get questions. What's a heat pump? Do I need to upgrade my wiring? Can you help me access information to figure out how to do this work? And are you really an official heat pump coach? Maybe not quite that last one yet, but I expect when all of you have your official heat pump coach hats and whistles, you'll get much more of those questions in the near future. So hopefully this webinar gets us started in that conversation and gets us moving along the path to empowering everybody here to go out and start spreading the word. So what does it mean to electrify everything? As I already said, it's a bit about the machines themselves. So replacing products that currently burn fossil fuels with something that burns no fossil fuels, something that's clean and electric. Of course, our energy, our electricity today still comes in large part from fossil fuel sources. So we also need to change the energy supply. This is a two-part process. It's really about removing the fossil fuels from the economy on the demand side, or those appliances and cars and furnaces and all the things that currently burn fossil fuels today, and then reinventing the way that we produce energies through rooftop solar, community solar, grid-connected solar and wind, and all these ways we have of generating and storing clean, renewable energy. And we recently released a report we call the Pace of Progress, which really, we hope, starts the conversation in a little more granular way about the pace at which we need to make this transformation. So what we did in this report, and I believe there'll be a link dropped in the chat pretty soon here if you haven't seen it, is to figure out exactly how many fossil fuel products of each type are in the economy today and set a path for us to get from here to 100% electric by 2050. This first report was done at a national scale, and it says things like, we know that the market for heat pumps for space heating, let's say, is growing at a certain pace already, and we need to accelerate that pace of progress by X amount over 3 years to put us on this trajectory for a complete transformation of the economy. These are what are called S-curves. They're really sort of well-known models of market transformation and market adoption that have been used to model the adoption of the cell phone versus landline, for example. And we have every reason to believe that electric products can do exactly the same thing. So we've done this, again, at a national level across the products that we care the most about, and we'll soon be releasing localized versions of this Pace of Progress, which will let you see, as an advocate in your community, exactly how much work there is to be done where you live and how quickly you need to start doing that work to make this transition complete. So this is all about helping you understand how to do your part wherever it is that you're advocating for this change.
All right, so obviously we have a need for massive policy changes to get where we need to go, but we have to also be thinking about our communities. We need your neighbors, your friends, your family, maybe even you, to be rethinking about energy, how you interact with it, how your home uses it. And that's what today's really about, is kind of starting that conversation, learning from our colleagues that have been doing this for a while and getting feedback from you to make sure that as we navigate the next 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, that we're doing so with an eye towards success, impact, and really doing it in an optimal and efficient way. We have some great success stories from folks like the Heat Smart Alliance, who have worked closely with communities throughout Massachusetts over the last couple of years to build up capacity of volunteer coaches. As a partner, Abode has been working with them to continue to fill that funnel and engage folks across multiple communities to give them a pathway of learning and a community of support so that they can have as big of impact as possible. So thinking a little bit about how we got here. So 15 years ago, a lot of us on this call were talking about energy audits. We're talking about going to your local utility or a state program, getting that energy assessment and putting insulation in your home. The concept of insulation is pretty well understood. People knew the value of it, and it was something that was generally kind of accepted across all demographics, all political affiliations, kind of just everybody got it, and that was awesome. And then around 10 years ago, thanks to our friends out in the Pacific Northwest, this concept of solarize became an idea. And here in Massachusetts and throughout New England, many of our communities have also really latched onto the concept of a solarize campaign. And just for those who aren't familiar with that, essentially what that is a community selects a single contractor that can deliver solar kind of as using economies of scale, driving the cost down so that residents throughout the community through a limited amount of time can get solar quickly and with a level of affordability that they might not otherwise have. This concept has worked relatively well, and it's certainly done a huge job of growing the understanding of solar and just making it more acceptable. You drive down so many streets throughout New England and you'll see solar panels on house after house after house. And a lot of that is the credit of these solarized campaigns that really normalized the concept of solar. The next thing is the heat smart concept. So the heat smart idea really took the framework of solarize and said, can we do this with heat pumps? And in many ways, there's a lot of kind of conceptual ideas that can transfer, but in a lot of ways, it's really challenging. For those of you that know and maybe have gone through this yourself, putting in heat pumps in a home, particularly retrofitting, can be pretty challenging. Every house is different. It requires a lot of specialization. Not all pieces of equipment are created equal. How it's installed matters a lot. And so there's just a lot more nuance about it. And one of the things that we've observed over the last decade or so, both with Solarize and with the Heat Smart campaigns, is that oftentimes when a single contractor was selected, there was some risk to those contractors being a little overwhelmed and then having kind of customer service or quality installation issues down the road. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about addressing that here in a bit. But there's a lot of learnings and a lot of successes that we really want to drive from. And then we get to this concept of electrifying or decarbonization. And that's where we're at now. And this is where the impact becomes huge, but so does the complexity. And so do the questions and the confusion in the marketplace. And so that's where energy advocates at a local level play such a tremendous role in helping to, kind of course correct misconceptions, that folks may have, and really lay a really great foundation of engagement to help people get excited and enthusiastic about what it takes to really electrify or decarbonize a home. So that's the kind of iterations that we've gone through, and we're continuing to learn, and we will continue to learn. And the community of engagement that we have here of stakeholders that have done these things are what will continue to be informing what we do next. When we think about this, and this is kind of a very conservative number, but what we're seeing right now is that one trained energy advocate or coach can have around 75 or more kind of engagements per year. Now, I think that number is actually understating this a little bit. When we think about this, we're typically thinking about a scheduled phone call or something that's a little bit more structured. But oftentimes the impact that we see from energy coaches is that changing the minds of people when you're at the Little League game, when you're on the sidelines, when you're taking a walk in the park, when you're on a Facebook community group, that's where a lot of this actually happens. And I'll use my own self as an example. Being active in my community, I've got 2 kids, I'm on the Facebook group for our town. And a lot of parents, I would say probably at least once a week, someone will say, hey, I'm thinking about getting a new heater or a central AC, or someone asks, do heat pumps even work in New England? And I'm now this person that's always on there, going in there, making sure that people have the right information, the right links, the right answers, and then oftentimes having engagements directly with folks to further support their exploration of these solutions. And those types of small engagements add up to a huge impact and are really important in changing the dynamic about how people perceive these technologies and their understanding of kind of what's normal. And so that's going to be a massive thing for us, is when we think about the scale that we have to reach, we need thousands and thousands of people out there trained like this, who are able to have meaningful conversations, be educated, be informed. You don't have to be a technical expert, but there's just so much misinformation out there and so much opportunity for us to build enthusiasm and awareness that we can have just a massive impact as we collectively come together. And so that's what we're trying to do today. Now, we're going to take a step back for a moment here and look back at the last decade or so and think about some of the common challenges that we've run into. So I'm only going to touch on these briefly, but we will be expanding on some of these both through our trainings down the road, as well as I'm happy to have further conversation with folks. But one thing I imagine you all understand is that in your community, There will be folks that don't believe you. They don't believe in the technology. They don't believe in the cause. They don't understand or believe the science behind climate change. And they might be very vocal in your community. Expect that. Don't take it personal. Don't get your feelings hurt. It's going to happen though. Another thing that we're going to talk more about in a second is contractors, and quality contractors. They can be really difficult to find right now, mainly because so many of them are so busy doing what they do. And so understanding kind of the reality from the contractor's perspective can help you inform what makes an effective community program as well. Now, whether it's from skeptics, contractors, the internet, wherever, people are getting conflicting information about these technologies and these solutions. And again, that's one of the biggest opportunities for us as energy advocates in our communities to be engaged and help kind of correct that. Another thing to think about is if you're running a campaign and you have volunteers in your community, these folks typically have lives. They have other things going on. And so we have to be kind of respectful and think about the fact that, not everyone's going to be around to volunteer indefinitely forever. That's important to kind of keep in mind as we set goals and are prioritizing. And the last thing on these kind of common issues that we see is, the technologies are evolving. They're evolving quickly, and that's great. But it also can make it challenging as a volunteer who's not a technical expert, living and breathing this stuff, reading books about it when you're on vacation, like I do, this stuff is hard to stay on top of. And so the community of support is going to be really critical. Having those resources to be able to ask questions, to share experiences is going to be really important as we move down the road. Now, for a second, I do want to dive into the contractor component here. All right. So it's important to recognize that not all contractors are bad. Contractors are, trying to run businesses, and contractors are just generally risk adverse. All right. I say that so that we have this context about bringing in new and innovative technologies to the table. Contractors get really comfortable with technologies or with equipment that they have installed and supported for a long period of time with little to no callbacks. They want to get in, make their sale, get their piece of equipment or technology installed, and then go to the next customer without having to worry about what they've just installed. And so new technologies kind of present a challenge there. There's a learning curve. There's, something about trying to figure out how to do this the right way and getting callbacks and not being able to solve for them. And so that is a real challenge, but there are ways that we can address that. Now, a couple of things from the community side, though, that I want you to think about. And I alluded to this a little bit kind of in the history of campaigns here. And one is, don't expect one contractor to serve your whole community. I think that there's opportunities there to help drive down costs in some of those campaigns. But at the end of the day, the scope of what we're trying to do is so massive. We need every contractor possible focused on this. We need every contractor that has the licensing, the capacity, the skill set, the knowledge to be all in on supporting these types of initiatives. So, be conscientious about that. We want to be inclusive. And when you're trying to find good contractors, many of you might be fortunate enough to live in a state or a community that has a good contractor network, whether it's through the utility programs or otherwise. So when you get started down this road, don't necessarily think you've got to reinvent the wheel. There are resources out there for you that we highly encourage folks to leverage. And then finally, on that contractor engagement side, bring them in early, bring them in often. The more you can build that relationship with them, the more that the local contractors, whether they're plumbers, electricians, otherwise, feel bought in to what you're trying to do as a campaign, the more they're going to be engaged and the more you might learn as well. I think that, we want to make sure that as we're implementing these campaigns, that we are keeping open ears, open eyes to what's going on around us, whether that's with the customers, the clients in the community, or the contractors, the utility programs, or otherwise. So having that ongoing engagement out of the gate is a really critical component to driving successful long-term programs. All right, so I've given you a just really brief kind of, here are 5 common challenges. And so you've heard all of that and you're thinking, that's not bad at all. I can totally rock this. My community's all in, let's do it. All right, well, now let's think about some of the things to consider when you're getting started. One thing I'd highly recommend is just think about what your community needs and think about what matters to them and set goals that do connect with their message, with their needs. I think that when you think about some parts of the state where there's a lot of delivered fuels like home heating oil or propane, helping to have a message that is getting folks off of those fuel sources. Or maybe you have a part of the country that is continually warming and doesn't have really good air conditioning infrastructure. Maybe your messaging and your goals are about increasing the number of households that have high efficiency air conditioning. So just really be thoughtful about that as you're thinking about your goals within your community. It's not just we need 500 homes to get heat pumps, but go a level deeper. Think about what really matters there. The next thing I'd also note is build collaborative partnerships. You as a community, as a small group of volunteers, maybe you even have a couple of paid people through a town program or otherwise, you're not going to do this on your own. It takes all of us, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of voices and perspectives. So partnerships and collaboration is just going to be so critical. We're going to chat about that here one more moment. The next thing, and I already alluded to this a little bit in the challenges, but is pace yourself with volunteers. Helping folks have the opportunity to engage as little or as much as they want, but kind of engage is really important. We've watched a lot of programs where there have been people that have, you know, big opportunities to, or enthusiasms, there's a red line on my screen, that's funny, opportunities to engage and to work hard with folks. Let's see if I go back real fast. Well, that's unique. We might be stuck with a red line for some reason on my screen. It's always fun when we're on the internet. I'm not sure what's going on that. So with that in mind here, getting back on pace or on track here, your volunteers that you have are going to be important, and you want to be respectful of their time, and you want to give them the opportunities to engage in a way that makes the most sense to them. Now, as you go through this, it's important to remember that folks don't want to be typically the first ones to do things kind of en masse. They don't want to make silly mistakes, but they also don't want to be left behind. And so as you're thinking about opportunities to build awareness in your community, think about peer pressure. Now, social proof is the nice way to say like grown-up peer pressure. We want folks to be excited about heat pumps. We also want them to see it happening a lot. We want them to be excited about decarbonizing, whether that is with a new induction cooktop stove, whatever it might be. We want them to be pumped up about it. And the more that they see their friends and neighbors doing it, the more likely they are going to be willing to do it themselves. So keep that in mind. Social proof is a really important component of this. So the next thing I'm going to mention here is celebrate your impact. Now, that's a really critical component to thinking about what you're doing and how it's working, and really making sure that your community stays engaged and that people are excited about the technology and seeing what's really happening kind of at scale. All right, so the next slide here, we're focusing on kind of collaboration. For those who have not engaged with Doug McKenzie more, yeah, that's funny, the red line, I'm just reading the note real fast here from Allison. Thank you. Allison's from Canary Media, by the way, so she should be an expert on this stuff here. I do see lines coming in on their green line now. So for those who are not familiar with Doug McKenzie Moore, he's been a leader in community-based social marketing for decades, and someone that, I see more lines popping up. He's been a leader in this space for a long time, and someone that, as I was transitioning my career into this space, I really, threw myself into the concepts of how do you help communities change. And that has just been such a meaningful way to think about how it's not just one home at a time, but it's a community at a time that moves to a state and beyond. And so this notion of people are more likely to take action when asked to do so by someone they know and trust has been kind of a mantra for me and in so many programs that we've led. And what this really boils down to is that, myself as just another white guy from Boston rolling into a community saying, hey, this is a really good idea, you should think about X, Y, or Z technology, only goes so far. Yet whenever I've been able to collaborate with affinity organizations, houses of worship, different groups within communities, and empower our message to go through them, we've had such better success. It's been really phenomenal to see how whenever you can take your message and give it to folks within the community to be a partner in deploying that, to be a partner in helping to educate and engage, you're going to go so much farther. And so again, this comes back to that idea of, we can't do this on our own. This really does take so many of us working actively together and collaborating. The last thing I'll say on this, is thinking about how inclusive you can be. So when you are looking at those partners and you're thinking about collaboration, think about, what are the needs of your community that you might not be aware of? And one of the things that we see time and time again in a failing of different efficiency and electrification programs is that the folks that need these services and programs and solutions the most are oftentimes the ones that aren't getting them at the same rate as others. And there are a variety of reasons for that, whether it's upfront cost, language barriers, simple awareness, but a lot of those things can be addressed, and specifically on the language barriers and awareness. So think about when you're developing campaigns, if there's an opportunity to convert your educational materials or your messaging into languages that are going to be more widely understood or leveraged within your community, that's really important, because this is not a success as a movement if it is leaving large swaths of our population behind. It really, really does have to be lifting all of us together. And so that inclusiveness is incredibly, incredibly important. All right. Now let's pivot for a moment here and talk about some of the resources for your community here. From Rewiring America and Abode, we're bringing as much as we can to the table here, whether it's resources that are helping you to fight at the policy level, individual resources to making decisions, as well as guides. And from there, we're converging to help create these advocate training programs and a variety of support materials that can be used for you and your community. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve to chat a little bit more about what Rewiring America is doing right now.
Thanks, Travis. I've already mentioned the Pace of Progress report. And again, that is currently a national report, and we hope to make that more local and accessible to everyone to see the specifics of their community and understand, again, the challenge and ahead of them and the pace at which we need to move. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks and more evolutions of that work to come. We have plenty of guides and resources, PDF format and online on our website. We currently have a incentives calculator. So on our website, you can find tools that will allow you to enter your zip code and your income level and see exactly which tax credits and incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act you will be able to access, or any homeowner or taxpayer that you're speaking with will be able to access through the Inflation Reduction Act. And coming soon, we will have a much more in-depth tool called the Personal Electrification Planner. I'm not sure exactly what we'll brand it, but the idea here is to really provide step-by-step guides for people to interact with online and understand exactly which equipment in their home needs to be replaced and which steps are required to make that happen, and prioritize, among all the different potential actions that they can take towards moving towards an all-electric future. And that will also be accessible to everyone, and will integrate with our incentives calculator and potentially provide some cost estimates as well that can help you make the case for those, particularly those with expensive fossil fuels like delivered fuels, those with oil heat or propane, or people with electric resistance heat in their home, who really stand to save the most in terms of this transition to all electric. So much more to come there from us at Rewiring. Keep in touch with our website and our newsletter, and you'll get all of the latest updates there. Next.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. All right. So let's take a few minutes here to talk about the Energy Advocate training and where we're at with this. So at the end of the day, the energy advocates, you all, your friends, neighbors, future energy advocates are going to be the ones that are having those day-to-day engagements at the front line and helping us as we lead the charge to electrify everything. What we aim to do as our collaboration with Abode and Rewiring America is to give folks a baseline of what they need to be an effective energy advocate in their community. And this includes, understanding of building science basics. This is not going to mean that you are now a certified home energy rater and ready to go out and start scoring homes, but you are going to have a good foundational understanding of how homes heat and cool, how they use energy, how that energy interacts with the grid, et cetera. And I think that's an incredibly important part of this, because oftentimes we want to make sure that we're really focused on the most logical improvements first. And in most instances, that's just use less energy, right? So building science basics help really inform that conversation. The next thing is around decarbonization solutions and those technologies. Spending time thinking about where they're at in the marketplace, where they're going, what to expect. And then we're going to wrap all this up with kind of guides on how to be an effective energy advocate. How do you bridge all of this information and how do you make it applicable to your community when you are having these types of conversations? As part of this, we'll also be publishing community toolkits so that folks have some off-the-shelf resources that you can adapt for your community. There's no sense in people trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're able to kind of figure out some things that work relatively well. We're always going to be making them better and reiterating and making them more impactful, but we're going to give what we have out there now so that as a community, you can begin to strategize, plan, and implement. And then we'll also be conducting some monthly regional meetings where we'll be able to dive a little bit deeper into some of the specific topics that are related to your building stock or your local state or utility incentive programs, or even the implementation of IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, as that becomes a more well understood and more built out program. So we're really excited about this. And where we're at right now is, we need your help to think a little bit more about what's going on. So, or what's going to be part of those trainings. So with that in mind, we're going to take a moment to pause, begin answering a couple of questions here. And then also we have the opportunity, we'd love to get some feedback from you as we go along. So I think we have, is it 2 questions to kind of get started with that came in as part of the registration? And then we'll talk a little bit about how to get feedback from you and then continue to answer questions as time allows. So one of those questions came in from Zula around how do you navigate engaging motivated folks who are not deep experts or who don't have deep expertise? I mean, this is nearly everybody on this call with limited exception. And I put myself into that camp depending on what the technology is. It's amazing from what I've been able to see over the last decade, the breadth of life experience that these motivated folks bring to the table and how they can really take their own, whether it's professional or personal perspectives and have that add even more value to what we're trying to do as part of these community programs. Now, sometimes folks can be very motivated to the point that they're out there kind of talking about things maybe they shouldn't. And I'd actually say that is a little bit of a risk that we run into every so often, where we have a highly motivated energy advocate who wants to go say everything they've ever heard, and maybe they're getting some details wrong. And so that is a risk and a challenge. But I think that our goal right now is to kind of help put good guardrails on folks that are sharing this level of motivation, but without having the deep level of expertise. And so one of the most effective things you can actually do is kind of giving them a framework for simple questions or common challenges that are experienced, and then resources on where folks to go or where to send folks. So whether that's the local utility program or a state renewable program or heat pump program, knowing what resources to give someone for that next step is actually pretty critical. And really, when you're engaging with these motivated folks who are getting excited, just really helping them to also kind of figure out where to self-regulate. What is their limit? Where should they stop talking? Which again, can be challenging when someone's excited, but that is an important piece of that. So really just making sure that we give people the right resources and the opportunity to plug into what they need and find out what the next steps are. It's really important. And then our next question here, and this one's super nuanced, but how should we communicate about dual fuel hybrid heat pump opportunities for cold climates? And so Mark, really appreciate this question. For us, and I'm in New England, so we're kind of facing a lot of similar challenges where it gets really cold, and heat pumps have come a long ways in the last 5 to 10 years. There are many systems that are very capable of being the sole source of heat for a properly air-sealed and insulated home. The challenge right now is that that sentiment is not completely shared by the contractor community. There are some really great contractors that have had the experience. They've done the installs, they've seen the success, and they're out here doing this. But this is one of those examples where folks in your community are going to get conflicting messages. And I think that when we start to think about the opportunity for converting people away from dual fuel systems to solely heat pump that's the direction we obviously want to go, but we still have to balance the realities that a lot of folks are facing. And so as an example in that kind of consideration is right now, electricity rates in certain parts of the country, New England being one of them, are quite high. And so as folks are converting from relatively efficient gas systems to air source heat pumps, their operational cost for the heating season may go up a little bit. And we want to be transparent about that. We don't want to be telling folks that it's a guaranteed savings and that now's the time to do it. But it's certainly important to think about kind of why folks are converting, and also to kind of think ahead. The rates that we have now are not the rates that we're going to have forever. You know, when you think about it from a policy standpoint, as we continue to add more reliable renewables to our grid, we're going to see prices go down. There's also the reality that as our natural gas infrastructure continues to become more of a global commodity, our natural gas is also going to go up. And so, you know, there are, in our perspective, kind of a converging trend line in which point we're going to see the electricity will be the more cost-effective fuel source, even compared to some high efficiency gas. That might not be in the next 2 or 3 years. And so, you know, again, honesty, we really believe that that's just got to be kind of core to this. But I think that that's something that's just really important as we're considering this. That being said, you know, if someone's got a fine heating system right now, but they need to add air conditioning, or they need to replace their central AC, let's definitely get them going with their high efficiency heat pumps, because you know what's going to happen is they're going to start using those heat pumps in the wintertime. And the more they understand what they can do and what they're capable of, the more likely they are to use them. And then when that heating system does fail, they're already set up for long-term success with their heat pumps. So we don't shy away from this conversation, but we have to be honest and transparent about it and realize that it's nuanced. My last comment on this is that looking ahead, there were some questions about lobbying and advocating for policy. You know, the more we can see progressive rate structures that account for the cost of carbon, the better off we're going to be. And that comes into play here. If we can see effective rate structures that are going to give an appropriate cost or discount to folks that are converting to heat pumps for their primary heating versus fossil fuels, that will over time also be a pretty critical role in this. So there's opportunities there for those of you that really want to focus on the policy side of things. All right, so I'm going to turn the next slide over here to our friends at Rewiring America.
I think, Travis, we actually had a few questions that were submitted while you were speaking. Do you guys want to spend, call it 10 to 15 more minutes answering some questions, and then we'll tell everyone a little bit more about the survey?
Perfect. Do you want me to stay on the survey slide?
Wherever you like.
All right, we'll leave it here. It's fine. It's a cute slide.
I pulled a few questions for you guys.
Great.
We got a lot of great ones. I encourage everyone to continue to flow them in using the Q&A tool. The first is from Katie, who is in Minnesota. So Katie's question is about contractors. She says most where she lives won't install all electric systems, and that she only knows 2 HVAC providers who will do all electric. So her question is, are there any resources to help get contractors to shift their way of thinking?
That's a great question. I mean, Minnesota, you said Minnesota, correct? Yeah,
That's right.
So Minnesota has some really great resources that we found recently. I will make sure to look those up, but in conjunction both with the state and some of the universities there around, you know, heat pump and electrification solutions. You know, one of the things that we found in our experience is that social proof matters. And so as other contractors in the area are able to see that contractors are successfully selling and installing these systems and having good outcomes, that's just going to be a sheer market driver for them to want to grow in that capacity. Another, you know, reality that we're seeing right now, and this has got a little bit more limited kind of in scope currently, but will be growing, is, you know, as we begin to actually evaluate at a technical level the quotes that customers are getting, we are able to kind of demonstrate that the modeled likelihood that a system will meet those customers' needs is really high. And we're also seeing instances in which customer or contractors are coming back to Abode after losing jobs because their customers had a conversation with us and were kind of educated around the capacity of heat pumps and what they can be doing. And that presented us as a program administrator an opportunity to have pretty thoughtful, meaningful conversations with contractors. That's slow to scale and requires a high degree of kind of technical support. But that is an example. And the last one I'd say is, there are resources through the different regional energy efficiency programs. So up here in our neck of the woods, we have NEEP, which is the Northeast Energy Efficiencies Partnership, or neep.org. They have a cold climate list and a program that outlines a lot of great resources that we highly recommend for contractors that are wanting to explore more of the kind of technical potential of these systems. But, coming back to the beginning of the answer, the money is what matters. And if these contractors are seeing more folks in their communities converting to heat pumps, they're going to want to get on board and learn how to do it.
And Travis, just specifically to Minnesota, I dropped a link in the chat to the Minnesota Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, which has some contractor resources, which might be helpful there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, you guys ready for the next one?
Shoot.
Okay, we've got an anonymous question that came in from someone who lives near Village Green, which I believe is in Los Angeles. So they said that this is a historic landmark with 600 residential units, and that the condo association there has not considered any energy improvements for almost a decade. Their question is one of communication. How do I get their leadership to take electrification seriously?
It's a great one. Steve, do you want to start, or I can?
Go for it.
All right. So I think that there are instances in which, I'd always ask a lot of questions when these types of questions come to me, like who's responsible for both the operations, maintenance cost, the ongoing, utility cost, et cetera. One of the things that we've been able to see successful in kind of similar circumstances is, when there is a meaningful cohort of folks within those types of communities that are seeking these types of improvements, that can be pretty valuable, both in terms of a voting block if it's a condo association, or just showing or demonstrating that there's an interest and need for these types of services. That's unfortunate that this person's in that situation, because likelihood there's some great, very logical, cost-effective improvements that could be made, and then with a little bit of investment, they could be probably doing a lot more. I would also encourage folks, depending again on their community, to see if their towns or utilities have any resources that might make sense to be brought in. As an example, in Massachusetts, through the Mass Save program, there are some really good resources that actually kind of operate focused on large scale developments or multifamily programs that can help kind of speak that language and also help navigate the different financing incentives. So, I would think that I'd encourage this person to, don't feel like you're doing this all alone. Look for the resources that might be in and around you. And then, as we continue to grow as a community here, I think we'll be able to share some success stories and impacts that you could also hopefully take to your community kind of leaders and stakeholders there.
If I can add to that as well, we spend a lot of time talking about heat pumps and space heating, but we are, this is also about induction stoves instead of gas stoves, and heat pump water heaters instead of gas water heaters, installing electric vehicle chargers to make it more, in a multifamily community so that people can have access to EV charging in a convenient way where they park. There are a lot of different strategies here, and the heating strategy might not always be the easiest starting place. So I encourage everyone to think about this holistically and think about where they can make progress quickly. If you can get information about which, if you've got a building with shared heating or shared water heating, find out, when that's scheduled to be replaced, because then the electrification installation is not just the entire cost of that, but the differential cost between that and what would normally be used to replace the existing fossil fuel heating system. So that can really make the economics better, depending on the scenario we're talking about. So it's not a simple task to answer some of these questions, but taking that holistic perspective would certainly help open up the options a little bit more.
Yeah, and to Steve's point about planning, that is actually one of the things, whether it's an individual resident or a large multifamily or commercial property, planning ahead for electrification is one of the more challenging things because oftentimes when equipment fails, you need it replaced right away. And when you're in that kind of moment of rapid decision making and need, it's oftentimes very easy to revert back to kind of what you have or what the contractor has on their truck. And that's why being proactive and thinking about these types of questions before systems fail is really, really important. All right, Patty.
Yeah, on that note, I have a really good question from Nick, who wants to know, what can we be doing for lower income communities? They say most of the people they know who are taking action are ones who can afford it and are wondering how to think about resourcing for those who cannot afford it right now.
That is so incredibly important and challenging. Yeah, Steve, go for it. I've been dominating here, so you go.
Well, one thing I want to point out here is that the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act are really targeted to help low and moderate income families make this transition, and they are distinct from the tax credits, which are available for everyone with a tax liability. You don't have to have a income tax liability to qualify for the credits, and the credits are more lucrative for those in the lower income brackets. So it's up to $14,000 to go towards equipment, to installation costs, to the wiring that may need to be done. And definitely expect to see those programs coming pretty soon from states. We expect the Department of Energy to put out some new program guidance as early as this week, and the states will then quickly begin putting in place these programs targeted at low and moderate income communities specifically.
Yeah, and one of the things, so there's the Inflation Reduction Act, which aims to further increase the impact of some existing programs like the Weatherization Assistance Program that is delivered through local community action offices and companies or organizations rather. I would encourage folks to engage with the local community action agencies that are administering those federally funded programs. They're in part federally funded and also funded typically through a variety of other mechanisms, whether that's utility ratepayer funds and or state funding. But that is actually an area where Massachusetts has been able to see some pretty meaningful progress, because in the past, again, that concept of planning for decarbonization is one that is challenging when you are in an emergency replacement situation. And so being able to help those types of agencies start to have more proactive conversations with folks that are on fuel assistance, that can be a pretty meaningful way to help getting this on their radar, and also working with contractors to make sure the contractors that are participating in those programs are aware of and excited about the different kind of technology solutions, heat pumps or induction cooktop stoves, solar, whatever kind of makes sense. That is, all of that. I'd also, Nick, to your other point, I mentioned this kind of earlier in the slides, but think about the value proposition that matters to people. So a lot of folks on this call, maybe all of us, are highly motivated by the real impacts of climate change. We're here because we really care deeply. That is a luxury for some of us that is not afforded to others because of life and circumstances. And they've just got, we need to be mindful of, the why behind people making these decisions to, improve their homes, to invest in them, and really try to speak to what helps them get to where they need to be. And so as we're thinking about the cost effectiveness of these solutions, ensuring that we're fully leveraging the universe of incentive and utility programs or state programs. And then as more clarity comes around with the Inflation Reduction Act, really being prepared to help support that, because there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for folks to write off what is the potential impact because of some of the perceived complexity. And I think being trained as an energy advocate in advance of that, being prepared for that, and having the community of resources to be able to respond to the questions that might be coming out is going to be one of the most effective ways that as a group, we can have impact kind of throughout the entire socioeconomic spectrum of our communities. But engaging with low-income communities is one that has always been a challenge. It's always been, I would say, somewhat of a failure for many programs because of how difficult it is. But there are successes that are out there. It's hard work, and it just takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of different entities to be kind of rowing the same direction at the same time. So it's not an easy answer that there's one solution.
All right, thanks, Travis. I think we've got time for one or two more.
Great.
So I've got a question from Deepa that we hear a lot. What is the best way to respond to concerns about resilience against power outages?
Yeah, my team and I, we get that question a lot. For most folks, if the power goes out, it doesn't matter what your heating system is or your cooling system is, your power's out. So I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And also, although it's difficult to do, just kind of rationalizing how often that happens and to what extent that it happens. So knowing kind of at a local level what the real kind of statistics are about that can be helpful. I know that doesn't solve this question for everybody, and that might actually make things worse. I'm fortunate. I live in a community that is served by a municipal light plant called Reading Municipal Light Department, and they have tremendous response times to local power outages. And so when they do happen, which inevitably, you know, limbs fall, things happen, they're able to respond quite quickly. So whenever I get that question, you know, it is kind of trying to help people put it in context of how real of a concern is that. That being said, you know, we are witnessing a transition in our local climates and the weather that follows, which is leading to, you know, longer, more sustained, more intense storms. And so the likelihood that we face this is going to be real. The other thing I would also kind of note is that as people think about kind of comprehensive whole home electrification, being able to combine, you know, solar and battery backup is a great way to do it. It might not be cost effective for everybody yet or affordable yet, but it will be. It's getting there. But I think the main punchline on this is that just really trying to help people understand how often they lose power, and when they do, how long is it really out, and trying to kind of move past that. But that is, depending on where you're at, that could be a real concern, and you know, that's something to consider. You know, we don't want to discount that because that's the barrier. We need to try to figure out how to address it.
Thanks, Travis. We've got time for one more, and then I'm going to kick it over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about our Energy Advocate training program. So last one is from Joe. Joe is interested in learning how to train facilitators and community organizers that can be championing climate action, but also thinking about justice, inclusion, and equity. I know it's a broad question, but wondering what you guys think.
I love that question because I think it has to be a core of everything we're doing. You know, we've already alluded to a couple of times, if we're implementing these programs and it's only helping the affluent white suburban folks, that's a failure. We need to be doing programs that are reaching across all communities and really engaging in a meaningful way. And so I think that, you know, one of my goals out of this collaboration and partnership with Rewiring America is to help folks like Joe get the context and the skills that they need to be able to kind of become a trainer, right? To like become a mentor within their community. Because what's going to happen is that, you know, it's going to be a scaffolding of folks where you've got volunteers that have kind of that baseline knowledge that are excited to have those conversations. But inevitably, as we've seen, like I've alluded to a few times, the Heat Smart Alliance here in Massachusetts, they've done a great job of nurturing kind of expertise within their volunteer base so that as new volunteers come in, the burden of training and kind of ongoing mentoring isn't always borne by just one person. And so as we look to communities like Joe's referring to, helping Joe become that expert over time is one of our goals here, so that, you know, you can be in working with those community-based organizations, you can be a resource for them, you can help them get excited and enthusiastic about it. So we're going to get there, Joe. It's going to be awesome.
All my goodness. Travis, thank you so much. It is not easy to speak with some great help from Steve, but for nearly an hour. We're almost at time, so I want to say thanks so much. I feel like this is a room full of 125 kindred spirits, and I wish I could have invited all of you to my heat pump party where I made really unattractive heat pump cookies and tried to convince my neighbors to get heat pumps, and it worked because if you bribe people with chocolate and cookies, it tends to have the effect you want. The next steps here, I've posted a link in the chat in case you're not a QR code person. We would love if you could help us by filling out the survey, because this was our attempt to see where people are coming from, what kind of knowledge they require, what things they're interested in, with the goal of building this beautiful course. And we're aiming to launch the course in September, so we have a bit of time till then, but not much. So please fill out the survey and tell us all the things we need to know. In the meantime, please avail yourself with all the Rewiring America resources you can, subscribe to our newsletter, and drop us a note, and we will send a follow-up email with questions that we can answer and a few more resources and a link again to this. But I'm so excited to see everybody here, and so excited about the prospect of building this course, because as Travis said, we need thousands of heat pump coaches, and that really wasn't an understatement. I think we need somewhere in the order of like hundreds of thousands of people helping their neighbors understand this stuff, because it's quite complicated, as the comments here attest. So unless I've missed anything, I want to say thanks to our wonderful Steve and Travis for leading a great webinar, and Maddie for facilitating, and all of you for your great questions.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Guys.
I'm just going to stay here to make sure I know how to